the more small lands, the better, because what that means is it's that's how you can circumvent the catch-22. That's how these players can go to these different lands and kind of prove themselves at these other different lands, even though they're not necessarily like the sickest of lands to go to. But if you go to RGN land and you can do well like Kusa did, it gives a lot of credence to you. I mean, it's very easy for you to get your shot. Like Stewie 2K, for instance, it's all being able to try out and have an opportunity to play and have an opportunity to get past the catch-22. So that's really just the idea, is like, from my perspective, my hands are tied, because when I look at different players, I have to say a proven player, an unknown quantity, you have to rate that above an unknown quantity, just by the very probabilities of it. But it's not necessarily the case. That might not be the actual truth. An unknown quantity might actually be way better than that known quantity. The unknown quantity just hasn't gotten opportunities. And that's really what talent acquisition is all about, is like figuring out who's good and who's not, despite not knowing everything that you can about both, and being able to give the right talent the right opportunities. And organizations still aren't at that level yet. And we're still not at that level where organizations are picking the players. And it's like, well, like, I'll get a player and I'll get like one or two players and I'll let those players decide. Because even if it were like that, it's not like that at the start of the games. It's not like that at ESEA Open. It's not like that at the Open level, the Premier level, the IM level, intermediate level. All those different divisions, those teams are kind of going together. Players are going together, and they're saying, I like this guy. I'll start playing with this guy. Like, okay, I'll pick up this kid, and I'll pick up that kid. And so the players themselves get to be the gatekeepers of like who they're playing with, because that's what makes sense. That makes most sense. It's like you decide who you want to play with, and you guys kind of have like some general chem, or you guys understand each other, or you maybe have the same philosophies, or maybe you've known each other for 4 or 5 years, 6, 7 years, so you know what you're going to get out of each other. And you just go on with that, and you play like that, and that's how you get to go on and succeed in various online plays. And then you go on to maybe cut somebody who isn't necessarily working well or isn't fitting the mold, and then you end up picking up somebody who maybe, like, you pick up Ricks or somebody, you pick up somebody who is good and you think they're good, and from then on, that team never has any organizational say. It never has any, like, the organization isn't the team. The team is the team. The players are the team. And the organization doesn't get to say, well, okay, I think this guy is cutting it. I think this guy isn't cutting it. Okay, I think this... Like, it never comes from the organization, I don't think. I think it's almost always the organization saying, well, who do you guys want to play with? Like, do you guys think this guy's good? And if you look at, like, any actual sports team, almost very rarely would this ever happen. Would you ever, like, have... I mean, it would only happen on maybe just giving a guy a shot, where the coaches would go to the quarterback and say, like, well, who's the wide receiver that you'd like to work with the most? Like, easily, it's always the coaches deciding, looking at the decisions that they're making, looking at the play that they're making, being aware of everything that's going on, looking at the review, and because they film everything, they film practices, they film everything, looking at, just players' footworks, their mechanics, how players are playing in different scrimmages and whatnot, and deciding who's going to play with who. And it's always the coaches that are deciding everything. The coaches are deciding who's playing, where they're playing, how they're playing, who's second string, who's first string, who's cut, who they're going to bring on board. It's always like the general manager and the talent scouts scouting, like, in-league talent, deciding who they're going to bring in, who they're not going to bring in. So that's how it actually works in those organizations that are very successful and have been working for years. And in this new organization, this esports organization, it's different. And I can't logically look at it and say that it's better, because you can't. I mean, there's this whole idea of being progressive and having new ideas and not doing things the way things have always been done. That's very backwards, and it's it's conservative. It's not progressive at all. Uh, it's literally like, what would keep you still living in a cave? It's like, well, we've always lived in caves, so let's just continue to live inside of caves because what we've always done. Why build houses? Why build buildings? Why air conditioning? Why any of that? We never had air conditioning before. We don't need it now. So literally, if you're looking to progress, though, you try different new things. But if those new things aren't any better than the old ones, then I mean, then you just stick with what works. So what works here would actually just be for the sake of players getting opportunities, would be organizations having say over rosters, having say over players, having say over people not making the cut or people not being able to play at the level they need to. And the issue is, I think, for a player to be able to do that, maybe they would come from, for a coach to be able to do that, maybe they would have to come from like a playing background. Maybe it would have to be like in 20 years from now, when like somebody like Dazed or Steel has like gray hairs, or Sean Gares, and you know, they're the general manager of Cloud9 or something, and they're picking the players and deciding the roster and who's going to play for who and who's going to play with what. So maybe that's the future of esports, but it's not what we're looking at now.